Hello pretty peoples, KawaJapa no Dolly desu. Today we are going to talk about the no-da, no-desu, n-da, n-desu endings in Japanese. As you see, there are 4 endings, but don't worry about that because they're all exactly the same. They are no followed by the copula da or des. The copula is da in its normal form and des in its formal form. And sometimes we abbreviate the no to n. But all these 4 endings are exactly the same. You will sometimes also see nanoda, nanodes, nanda, nandes, and so that looks like 8 endings, doesn't it? But these 4 are also all the same. So we really only have one thing to worry about. I'll explain what that na does in a moment. I've seen lots of explanations of this form online, and to be frank, they're all rather confusing because they don't explain the structure, they don't explain what's actually going on here. And that's very important because if we don't know that, we're going to get confused, especially when we get to slightly more complex constructions. Alright, so what's really happening here? Let's take an example. Haha ga kuru no desu. Now, the first and most obvious thing to notice is that if a sentence ends in no des, no da, n-des, n-da, then it ends in des or da, doesn't it? And as we explained in our lesson on the copula des, da, any sentence that ends in des or da is an A is B sentence. There are only 2 kinds of sentence in Japanese or any other language. A is B sentences and A does B sentences. So, nani nani no des must be an A is B sentence, not an A does B sentence. Now, if we look at our example, we can see that the original sentence, if you like, the sentence we would have started with is Haha ga kuru. That means mother is coming. That is an A does B sentence, isn't it? The subject, the doer, is haha, and the thing she's doing is coming. Very simple, and they're linked by ga, as they always must be. Now, when we add no des, we are turning that A does B sentence into an A is B sentence. What's going on here? What kind of an A is B sentence is this? Well, the simplest English translation is to say it is that mother is coming. How do we say it in Japanese? We all know that from the lesson on the zero particle. In Japanese, the word it is pronounced. That's right, it isn't pronounced. You can't see it when it's written, you can't hear it when it's spoken because it's the invisible pronoun it. So, haha ga kuru no desu analyzes to zero ga haha ga kuru no desu. Now, what's the core of this sentence? As we know, the core of a sentence is always the subject, the thing that's doing or being something, and the predicate, the thing that it's doing or being. So the core of this sentence is zero ga no desu. It is that. And the whole of the original sentence, haha ga kuru, is now loaded into that no, that thing. It's telling us what the no of the no des is. And we've seen this, haven't we, in the nominalizing no lesson. It's another example of the nominalizing no at work. And the other way to look at what's happening, which is important, is that we can say that the core of the sentence is zero ga no desu, and the original sentence has now become the shushokugo, the modifier of the no. It's telling us what that no is. So that is how no des sentences are structured. So what about nano des? What does that mean? Well, it's exactly the same construction, and this is the form we use when we are dealing with a sentence that was a copula sentence already, one that already had da or des at the end. As you notice, haha ga kuru no desu, we take a complete finished sentence, haha ga kuru, and we add no des, no da, to the end. Suppose we have a copula sentence, that is a sentence that says A is B and uses a noun, or a so-called na adjective, which is also a noun. For example, hana ga kirei da. Flower is pretty. If we want to put no-da or no-des on the end of that, we have to keep it as a complete sentence and then add no-da or no-des to the end. But we can't say hana ga kirei da no da, hana ga kirei desu no desu. You can't do that because da or des, the copula, can only come at the end of a sentence. The only thing that can come after da or des is sentence ender particles like yo or ne. So what do? We do what we always do when we want to put something after da or des. I explained this in the adjective lesson. We use the connective form of the copula, which is na. Na is da or des in its connective form. So, hana ga kirei da, that's the regular form of the copula. Kirei na hana, that is the connective form of the copula. And in this case, we say hana ga kirei da, and we want to add no da to the end, we say hana ga kirei na no da, or hana ga kirei nan da, hana ga kirei na no desu, hana ga kirei nan desu. And really, it's as simple as that. We keep the copula from the original sentence that ended in a copula, but we turn it into its connective form and then glue something else onto the end of it, which is the no da, no des, nda, ndes. It's very important to understand this because in casual speech you're going to come across sentences that end in things like nano and nano ni. So you have all these similar seeming confusing looking endings, but as you can probably tell already, nano and nano ni endings are not the same as what we're talking about here. And I'll discuss exactly what's going on in those sentences in the next lesson. So, let's look briefly at what are the uses of nano-da, nano-des, nda, ndes. As we've seen, it can be explanatory. And the important thing to know here is that taking our original phrase, haha ga kuru no desu, in English we say it's that mother is coming, and that's quite a deliberate construction, isn't it? It's a somewhat lengthy construction, it's a little unusual. We're probably only going to say that when we're responding to an exact question. But in Japanese, it's a much more regular, much more casual thing to say. So you might say it as an answer, why is the room so tidy? It's that my mother is coming, haha ga kuru no desu. But also, you might say it when your friend walks into the room and maybe just looks around a little, and you say, haha ga kuru no desu. And what you're saying there is, my mother's coming, but you're saying, it's that my mother's coming, so you were looking around the room and I bet you were wondering why it was so tidy, and well, it's that my mother is coming. So it can be used to answer questions that haven't even been asked and perhaps weren't even going to be asked. It can also be used to ask a question which implies a context to the question. For example, if you say, ashi ga itai desu ka? You're saying, does your leg hurt? But if you say, ashi ga itai no desu ka? Ashi ga itai desu ka? Well, perhaps you've seen the person limping a little, and you're saying, is it that your leg hurts? Is that why you're limping? It implies a context to the question. Now, it can be used in a variety of other ways. For example, it can be revealing something unexpected or secret. Say, kaige ga ikanakatta means I didn't go to the meeting. Kaige ga ikanakatta no da is like saying, the fact is I didn't go to the meeting. You probably thought I did, but I didn't. You can strengthen a statement by saying that is the fact. The fact is that it's like this. It can also soften a statement by making it sound more explanatory and therefore a little more conciliatory. So it has a wide range of uses, and I don't think there is very much to be gained by memorizing lists of its possible implications. The important thing is first of all to learn how it's structured grammatically, which I've taught you, and then to learn what it means, and it is roughly equivalent to it is that, or the fact is that, or something in English. And then you have the bones, the structure that you need to grasp its various implications. How do you learn its various implications? You learn them by reading Japanese, watching Japanese anime with or without subtitles, exposing yourself to Japanese. It's the only way to learn the nuances of the language. You can read a lot about swimming in books, and it's a good idea to do so. You can be instructed on how to do the strokes on dry land, and it's a good idea to have that instruction. But in the end, you are not going to learn to swim without getting into the water. However, there is one usage that I want to cover here because it's not very obvious from the structure, and that is that it can be used as a command. If you've ever seen the Anpanman anime, you will undoubtedly have noticed that when Biking Man, the villain, is bullying the children or doing something nasty, and Anpanman appears, he says, "Yamarunda, Biking Man." Now, Yamaru means stop, but on its own it's more likely to mean I'm going to stop or something like that. It's not an order directed to a third party. But Yamarunda it means you stop. And as I say, that's not very guessable. Is there a logic to it? Yes, I think there is. And I think we can see the logic if we look at another construction, which is when somebody says something like, "Ikunda, iku no da." It's that we go. And that means something like, okay, let's go. Okay, time to go. Ikunda. Now, when you direct it at another person in a commanding tone, what you're saying is, it is that you stop. Okay, it's time to stop now. Okay, what's happening now is you stop. And shukudai wo surunda, it is that you do your homework. You can see this as the Japanese equivalent of saying in English, you're going to do your homework, meaning I'm telling you to do your homework. Shukudai wo surunda, yamarunda, you're going to do it. The fact is, it is that you're going to do it. I'm telling you to do it. So, I hope you won't have any difficulty with these endings from now on, except for gaining the experience necessary to understand all its nuances. If you have any questions about that or anything else, please ask them in the comments below. And remember that the course book for this course of lessons is Unlocking Japanese. You can get it at Amazon in Kindle or paperback editions. Thank you for attending this lesson. これからもよろしくお願いします. Class dismissed.